There's a Chinese restaurant me and my wife frequently visit on lazy weekends or during rainy evenings when we don't feel like cooking anything. The food there is fantastic, and I genuinely have never had a bad experience with it. Plus, the prices are pretty unbeatable, and you can get a bento box with steak, sushi, dumplings, and egg rolls for only a little bit more than a meal at McDonald's, but far higher quality. We frequently stick around to chat about our days or whatever's been happening with each other. It's always a visit I look forward to. Once we're ready to leave, we make our way out the door, but before we do, we each grab a fortune cookie out of a cardboard box. They keep the box on a table that they have all of their random takeout supplies on. We walk outside and stand around the trash can near the entrance of the restaurant and unwrap the cookie. It's dry, boring, bland, mass-produced, and tastes vaguely of artificial vanilla flavor. It's not offensive or disgusting, but unmemorable. We read our fortune. "Believe in yourself," it says. I nod and chuckle to myself and throw it away. By the time I'm halfway across the parking lot to my car, my brain has ejected the message from my short-term memory, as the conversation I'm having with my wife about her day at work is far more interesting. The Backrooms movie released recently, and I thought it was absolutely amazing. It's been a while since I've watched a good psychological horror film, and this one knocked it out of the park. Very impressive, seeing as the movie's director is the youngest human being that has ever lived. The themes of losing yourself to guilt and nostalgia, psychological hang-ups, our decaying view of our memories, and our ability, or inability, to accept the past and learn from it resonated deeply with me. The film reminded me of some of the very best of my favorite horror series, Silent Hill, a horror video game series also about many lost protagonists navigating an increasingly nonsensical and supernatural town. The Backrooms leaves many of its questions without answers, and much of it can be interpreted as the viewer sees fit. The Backrooms as a location serve as a great vehicle for environmental storytelling. The empty rooms and increasingly bizarre architecture mirrors the protagonist's descent into madness. The fake still-life entities that mimic people serve as the way the main character, Clark, remembers them. The way he treats them shows the audience his narcissistic and callous tendencies, as he views the people in his life as furniture and not as other living people in the world. Much of Clark's madness is conflicted by Mary Klein, his therapist, who brings a very complex but more rational side to the story. Much of her background is shown to be due to her mentally ill and abusive mother, who Mary was unable to cure or fix. This is heavily implied to have drawn her to therapy, but as Clark proved to her, she can't fix everyone, a question the film asks and answers in more than one way. Can people be fixed? One of the strengths of the Backrooms is in its subtlety, its multiple themes, and the way it doesn't have to explain everything or tell you what to think. It isn't an art house film by any means, but it treats the viewer like a mature, thinking adult, something I very much appreciated. You leave debating it. You'll probably revisit it years later and notice new things or draw new conclusions each time you do. It invites conversation. Wonder Woman is a film that, while I don't dislike it, has very confused and simplistic messaging. The thesis of the film is that the evil in this world is not due to a single figurehead that shares blame, but with humanity's tendency for violence and cruelty. Only love will save the world, as Diana puts it. This simplistic theme is harshly contradicted with how the movie resolves its climax. After Diana kills Ludendorff, who she believes is Ares, she is saddened to find the violence of the war around her doesn't stop. Steve Trevor then has a speech to her that reinforces the movie's message, that no one bad guy is solely to blame for the world's problems, and that it's not about killing a big bad, but by standing by your beliefs that humanity can do better. Diana internalizes this by killing the big bad, who reveals himself as the true Ares, as the war around her suddenly does stop. It's messy, to say the least, and rather patronizing as well. The whole "only love can save the world" message is one that has been done to death, and handled far better than Wonder Woman. As I said, I don't dislike the movie. It has a lot of good moments, and I actually like Diana's character in a lot of ways, as she starts the movie with a very simplistic and childish view of mankind and evil, but learns and matures as the movie goes on. It's just the way the film resolves that doesn't make much sense at all, and completely runs counter to the message the film has been setting up, without any room for subtlety or nuance. Recently, I saw a post on Instagram that caused me to conceptualize this video. It also just so happened to be while I was waiting for my honey walnut shrimp entree to arrive at the Chinese restaurant I mentioned earlier. I couldn't find the post for a screenshot, but it was simply a photo of the yellow walls of the backrooms, with the text saying, "The point is that there was no point." The poster argued the absurdity and nonsensical nature of the backrooms was not a narrative tool, as I believe, but simply a way to illustrate the meaninglessness and irrationality of the film and human nature as a whole. I strongly disagree with this take. This is a sight I have seen from online discourse many, many times, and one I find very unfortunate. Movies are not often allowed to simply leave things up to the viewer anymore. Audiences now demand every tiny little thing needs to be answered. Just search The Backrooms Explained on YouTube, and you'll see dozens of videos all seeking to lay everything about the movie bare on every aspect. Everything from the lore, to the themes, to the characters, to the plot, explained in the most tedious and minute detail. Whether this is because audiences are unwilling to understand these films themselves, or just to fill out a content quota, this shift has caused me to coin a new term for the kind of movies this line of thinking will create: fortune cookie movies. These are movies where the messaging is as ham-fisted as possible, dialogue is clunky, and nuance is unseen. The moral message is clear, simplistic, and patronizing. Characters are more cardboard cutouts than flesh and blood humans, devoid of complexity, depth, or undesirable qualities. By the time you finish the film, you understand exactly what the film wants you to think, with zero ambiguity. Now, before I dive deeply into exactly what I mean, I just want to disclaim that I do not believe every single movie needs to have some deep, complex messaging or theming. One of my favorite movies is Napoleon Dynamite, a comedy that is easily one of the stupidest movies ever made, but I absolutely love it. If you forced me though, I could probably draw out some themes or messaging in the movie, like the value of loyalty to your friends, overcoming social anxiety, or how to feed steak to your llama. Not every blockbuster, family film, or narrative qualifies or even needs deep messaging or theming, and that's perfectly fine. What I'm talking about are movies where every conflict has one obvious answer, every character exists to prove the thesis without challenging it, morality is announced instead of explored, themes are repeated rather than developed, symbolism is literal, every audience member is expected to reach the same singular conclusion, and the movie mistakes clarity for depth. Take my Wonder Woman example again. The movie obviously wants the message to be that humans as a collective share blame for the evil we commit, and the evil we see is not due to a single bad influence. The movie proves this when she kills Ludendorff and nothing changes. Diana should have learned this as the core message of the film, as simplistic as it is, but then when she is challenged by the real Ares, she kills him and everything stops. The very next scene shows the war is over. She didn't learn anything. She was proven right. It flies in the face of the whole movie's setup. It confuses the audience while giving a very simplistic, childish view of evil that will feel patronizing to anyone who understands just how morally gray most of daily life can be. This kind of thing is fine in a Saturday morning cartoon that's meant to be casually enjoyed, but for a more grounded and mature movie, messages like this tend to feel more belittling than anything. To go back to the fortune cookie example, you crack them open, and what do you see? Trite, benign adages that 99% of the population would agree with. Be kind to people, work hard, be yourself, love is all you need. On the surface, these appear like wisdom, and it's not necessarily untrue, but they're just so generalized, interchangeable, impossible to disagree with, emotionally weightless and self-evident that it comes off more as a cliche from a cartoon than a moral message to ponder and consider long after you leave the movie. The audience aren't discovering a new idea or considering anything in a new light. They're recognizing an idea they already have. Take Aesop's Fables, for example. I had multiple Aesop's Fables books when I was a kid. Some of them genuinely hold advice I keep to this day. One example being about a lion that had bad breath. The lion asked his subjects to confirm or deny this. A sheep said that his breath smelled perfectly fine and was punished for being a flatterer. A crow told the lion the truth, and that his breath smelled awful, and he was punished for offending the king. The lion asked a fox, who said that he couldn't smell anything, and couldn't say one way or another, and was spared. The message is that sometimes it's better to say nothing, or stay out of a situation than to give your input. The book had many stories, and after each one, the moral was spelled out in black and white for you to read for yourself. Now here's the thing. These stories are absolutely fine, and I intend to share them with my children. However, that's the kicker. This type of storytelling is simplistic, and usually meant for children, who are just beginning to form their own personal moral compasses and views, and these will only become more complex and more complicated as they age. A person's view of the world changes as they live, or at least it should, and while having a strong moral compass is absolutely a good thing, it isn't beneficial to tell a fully grown adult with their own lived experiences that being nice to people is a positive thing. We've known that for years. It's far more interesting to take those simplistic concepts and then dive into them, stress testing them, and letting the audience come to their own more nuanced conclusions, because that's how art works. Art isn't a conclusion, it's a conversation. Now, don't get me confused. I don't believe that children's media should be simplistic or patronizing. C.S. Lewis has a quote that sums up my beliefs on that matter very well. He said, quote, "A children's story which is enjoyed only by children is a bad children's story," unquote. He is exactly right. One of my all-time favorite kids' movies is Up, a movie that I would argue only improves the older you are. The opening scene of Carl growing old with Ellie and going through their struggles and triumphs is an absolute masterclass in storytelling, and without saying even a single word, many audience members are in tears seeing Carl walking away from Ellie's funeral. That's with barely even knowing the character for 10 minutes and having no adult dialogue from her. It is peak cinema, and if I ever taught in film school, it would be a movie I would point to for drawing maximum emotional depth using minimal input. The movie never spells out its themes or morals, but they aren't patronizing or belittling. Does human connection matter after you lose the one you love the most? What is the value of holding on to the past over all else? Is it worth it to help those you don't know above your own goals and desires? How does grief limit someone's life? What makes someone a part of your family? Can helping others heal our own grief? I could go on, but you get my point. These are deep, complex themes that a child may not even fully understand until they're older, but that's okay. It's a way to teach them about these concepts, maybe before they ever have a chance to face them. The positive ending of the film answers these questions without being heavy-handed or ham-fisted, and by the time the credits roll, you're probably wiping tears from your eyes, and the smaller children in the audience may not fully understand why. It's a film I still think about frequently, and I consider it one of Pixar's best. The intellectual core of all this is a simple one. A message is an answer. A theme is a question. Theme: what do people owe each other? Message: always help people. Theme: what makes justice legitimate, and how far is too far? Message: revenge is bad. Theme: can evil people change, and what qualifies as unforgivable? Message: everyone deserves forgiveness. Themes invite thought, messages end thought. Themes are often more complex, and leaving them without an answer challenges the audience member to examine their own personal moral compass or experience and compare it. In Chicken Little, the message is believing in yourself with little ambiguity. Happy Feet does the same. Idiocracy criticizes anti-intellectualism, but in a way lacking any subtlety. Crash treats issues of racism in such a heavy-handed and simplistic way it's hard to take seriously. These films give you a message, and it's overt, hard to argue against, and gives the audience a very clear single answer that it refuses to leave up to them to discuss. There is no discussion to be had. The film already answered itself. By contrast, movies with themes ask questions the narrative may not fully answer, and lets the audience decide for themselves. The Dark Knight explores justice and corruption, and how sometimes the lines between them are blurred. The ending of the film with Batman using the invasive surveillance system to find the Joker was going a bit too far, but was it justified to find the Joker? The film doesn't answer this directly, and audiences may say yes or no depending on their own perspective. You can do this for many well-written movies. The Lord of the Rings asks, are ordinary people capable of extraordinary courage? Can small acts change the course of history? What makes someone worthy to lead? Is mercy a weakness or a strength? How should someone respond to loss or change? How does power corrupt? The Incredibles asks, what do exceptionally gifted people owe society? Is equality simply sameness? How should a family balance personal ambition with collective responsibility? When does that ambition become self-destructive? How do parents prepare their children to use their strengths and talents wisely? Can suppressing someone's nature lead to fulfillment? Stephen King's It asks, what gives fear its power over us? How do memories shape who we become? Is evil internal, external, or both? What does it mean to face your fears? What happens when a community chooses not to acknowledge evil? How does friendship help people confront those fears? Why do fear and trauma from childhood persist into adulthood? 12 Angry Men asks, what do we owe one another when someone's life is in our hands? How do social prejudice and assumptions distort judgment? Can one person change the minds of many? Is truth discovered through confidence or careful questioning? What responsibilities come with civic duty? The Princess Bride asks, can revenge ever truly satisfy? How much of life is shaped by destiny versus choice? What makes love endure through trials and hardship? What distinguishes true nobility from titles and status? What gives life meaning even when all hope seems lost? These are all themes, and they're all things people have asked themselves at one time or another. They are not meant to have a single concrete answer. So why do so many people today try to overly explain these concepts or are dissatisfied when a movie is ambiguous and intelligent with its storytelling? There are many different possible reasons. Algorithms rule our online lives, and the suits in charge of making movies know this. They aren't artists or storytellers. They just want to see the bottom line go up. They want movies that are safe, focus-tested, and optimized for maximum agreement. No ambiguity, instant interpretation, maximum social media praise and engagement. Franchise filmmaking has also damaged this, as once again the artistic vision is many times compromised since these films need to appeal to a global audience, and complexity becomes a marketing risk. This applies to critical culture as well, especially here on YouTube, where many lazy, hack-grifting movie critics like Critical Drinker, Nerdrotic, or Geeks and Gamers damage artistic storytelling with their horrendously bad critique that is often a poor disguise for their culture war acts they're trying to grind. Even outside of that embarrassing corner of movie criticism, oftentimes people increasingly ask what the movie is trying to say, instead of what ideas it's trying to explore. People are becoming less comfortable with uncertainty. We increasingly expect art to explain itself, justify itself, state its morality explicitly, and then reassure us that we understood it correctly. And even if the movie doesn't, people will flock to YouTube to get the morals or the message directly spelled out for them in the latest ending explained Easter eggs video. Ambiguity starts to feel like a failure of the movie to explain itself, when that's so often not the case. Confusion becomes something to eliminate instead of investigate. The irony being that confusion is often the first stage of true understanding. If you ask yourself why a movie did something, why you're confused, or why it's bugging you, you'll look into it, and then maybe learn the answer for yourself. It's far more intellectually beneficial than simply being told the meaning from a video from YouTube's explainer culture. Learning how to draw meaning out of a movie, even if it isn't exactly what the author may have intended, is better than having it told to you by someone else. It improves your media literacy and critical thinking skills as well. Complexity in a story matters. Real people are messy. They contradict themselves. Good people make bad choices. Evil people can be sympathetic. When there is no single solution, it allows room for exploration and discussion, and that's what makes those movies worth remembering. They remain alive because since they didn't answer the question, it's up to you to answer it yourself. Fortune cookie movies die the minute they're over because there's nothing left to discuss. They've already answered the question they posed. Now, there's obvious counter-arguments to the things I'm saying here, and I understand that. I'm not saying any of this is a hard and fast rule, as anyone is free to create whatever art they want, and that shouldn't ever change. There is plenty of merit and fun to be had with an easygoing movie that doesn't really feel like challenging the viewer. It's why we enjoy stupid movies like Sharknado. Simple doesn't mean bad. There are plenty of great movies that have very simple narratives like John Wick, Alien, The Martian, or Shawshank Redemption. Children's movies also can have enormous depth, as I've mentioned before. Accessibility isn't an enemy either, and that's why I deliberately haven't mentioned any art house films, even though there are plenty that I enjoy, such as The Lighthouse. This bleeds over into another point, that pretentiousness isn't complexity. Simply saying that some villains can be redeemed doesn't make anyone a genius. It's how those issues are explored realistically that makes a narrative good or not. This also applies to movies that are overly confusing. Confusing writing isn't intelligence, as certain movies like Tenet tend to bury their themes and points under an overly convoluted plot. The issue isn't simplicity, it's reduction. It's taking what could have been a very interesting spin on a common concept and boiling it down to a message from an episode of Nick Jr. We all know that being kind to one another is good, but what about being kind to someone who hates you or is against you? We know having confidence or self-esteem is good, but what if that self-esteem becomes delusional or self-destructive? We know that love can change the world, but what if that love is toxic, or for someone who has died, preventing the protagonist from living life without them? My mouth is currently watering imagining the honey walnut shrimp at the Chinese restaurant once again. The shrimp are huge, fried crispy and golden brown, and then drenched in a delicious, slightly sour sauce, with hints of honey, citrus, and garlic, all blending together and harmonizing with the savory shrimp and earthy candied walnuts. Afterwards, we eat the styrofoam-adjacent fortune cookie. It isn't terrible, it's just not why anyone came. People come for the meal. Likewise, movies shouldn't feel like 90-minute delivery systems for slogans. Great art, the best art, trusts the audience enough to leave them uncertain. It doesn't give them a trite, boring fortune, but something much more valuable, a question. And, if it's good enough, it's a question that they'll be trying to answer long after the credits finish rolling.